This is the notes for using center and spread. Hopefully some of this vocabulary sounds familiar to us, and then some of it may be new. I'm going to go ahead and highlight the new part is the idea that we're going to call this the measure of central tendency. Okay, so there's three ways that we can find this center. Hopefully we've heard of each of these vocab words though. Let's start with the mean. The mean of the set of data is the sum of the numbers divided by the number of values in that set. So I'm just going to write the reminder down here to myself. I add all the numbers, and then I divide by how many numbers are in my list. So for example, the total number of siblings in the data in the line plot is 56. How they got that is this 0 is a person that answered 0, and they added together each person's response. So this would be a person that answered 1, or this would be a person that answered 2. Okay. They kept doing that, 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 plus 4 plus 5 plus 5. They added all those together and they got 56. Then they went back and counted up and found that there were 19 people that did their survey. So after they add them, make sure you hit enter and then divide by 19. So they added all those up, they found the total to be 56, and then they divided by 19 people. My next center is called the median, and that's the number that marks the midpoint of an ordered set of data. So for example, in this survey above, once they're all in order, I need to put them in order if they're not in order, I cross them off until I work my way all to the middle, and I find that the center of my data is 3. Make sure the numbers are in order before you start counting off until you get to the middle. The important thing to note in this section is when it contains an even number of data sets, the median is when I find the average of the middle two. So for example, in this one, 30 and 1, 3 and 25, I'm left with 7 and 8 are both in the middle. So they did 7 plus 8, hit enter, and then divided by 2 to find my center. So I add those two up and I divide by 2 if there are two middle numbers. The last one for my center is the mode, and that's the one that occurs the most often. So for example, when these were in order, the mode happened 4 times, and that was 2. Or if you have a line plot, you can see the one that has the highest number of X's, that's your mode, because the most people selected that number. So 3 people chose 3, 3 people chose 5, but the most was 4 people there that chose the number 2. All right. The other way we're going to measure data today is by looking at the variability. So I'm going to highlight that. And there's 2 ways that we can do this one. So the variability, or I like to call it the spread, tells me how close my data is together or if it's spread out. So hopefully we've heard of the range before. The range is the difference of the maximum and the minimum in my list. So I like to think of it as my highest number minus my lowest number. In our example above in our line plot, the highest number is 11, the lowest one is 2, so my difference there is 9. I subtracted 11 minus 2 and got 9. The word that's new though is mean absolute deviation. The A in absolute comes from absolute value, so the distance is always going to be positive. So keep in mind when you find the distance, absolute value is always positive. So I'm subtracting them, I don't want any negatives. And then the mean is when I added them all up and divided, and then we're going to do that again to find the deviation of how far it is. So my note to myself is it's the mean of the mean. I find the middle number, and then I'm subtracting every number from that mean, and then I find the average again. So after I've added up all my distances, I divide a second time. So if you'd like a little example here, if I have a high spread, meaning my range is big and my absolute deviation is big, it's because the data maybe looks something like this. Okay, I have a little bit of clustered, but then I have some numbers over here that are pretty far spread apart. So when I find the middle and I start subtracting, I'm going to get a bigger number here for my deviation. If it has a low spread, which is usually what you're looking for if a good data set, is that they're close together. So it could be something like this. So if my line plot has a bunch of people responses all really close together, that would give me a low range and a low absolute deviation. Okay, let's go ahead and try an example. Let's go ahead and flip your notes over. A little bit. Okay. All right, so it says calculate the following for the number of sample sizes of a 6th grader's shoe size. So my first step anytime is going to be I want to put these in order from smallest to biggest. So I'm going to skim through my list, and the smallest number I see is 2, and then 4, and I kind of cross them off as I'm going to make sure I don't lose any of them. Then I see a 5, an 8, a 9, a 12, a 15, a 15, and a 20. Okay, so to find the average, we're going to add them all up and divide. So with our calculator, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 numbers. So I'm going to add 2 plus 5, 4 plus 5 plus 8. I'm going to add those all up. I would get 90. And I'm dividing by 9 numbers in my list. So we would say our mean is 10. The median is the middle. So 2 and 20, 4 and 15, 5 and 15, 8 and 12, and I lucked out. I had a center there of 9. If those were 2 numbers, I would have to add them up and then divide by 2. But we lucked out. We had an odd set of numbers, and so I had a true middle of 9. And the last one, the mode, if they're in order, I can see if I have any duplicates, and I do. 15 repeated here twice, so that's my mode. If I had another example that repeated twice, so say I had 20 and then another number of 20, I could say the mode is 15 and 20. Or if there's nothing in my list, I could also say that there's no mode. That is a possibility. Okay. The other note maybe make to yourself is these are what we call the center. This is trying to find the middle of my data. So the median is my middle. The mean is when I add them all up and divided, or the mode was the most often. Okay. Our other way we looked at the data was the spread. That was the range and the MAD. To find the range, I do my biggest number on the list minus the smallest. So 20 minus 2 is 18. That one's pretty easy. Okay. The hard work comes from finding the MAD. So my MAD is the mean of the mean. I go back to my mean is 10, and every number in this list has to get subtracted from 10. So 10 minus 2, 10 minus 4, 10 minus 5, 10 minus 8, 10 minus 9, and I'm going to switch because I want it to always be positive. So once I get to my other side, I'm going to start doing the bigger number, minus 10. 15 minus 10, 15 minus 10, and 20 minus 10. So the absolute deviation, the A is absolute value, so it's the positive because it's distance away from my mean. Then I need to add all those up again, just like how we found the mean. So 8 plus 6 plus 5 plus 2 plus 1 plus 2 plus 5 plus 5 plus 10. I added all those up and got 44. And then I have 9 numbers, so I'm going to divide by 9 and get 4.8 repeating. Okay. So I know that's a lot of work. Okay. If you don't want to write out the subtraction problem, we can just write what you get every time. So 10 minus 2 is 8, 10 minus 4 is 6, 10 minus 5 is 5. Okay, but on your project, your teachers are going to want to see every number after you subtracted. So as we're doing the activity today and the practice, get in that habit of showing what you got when you subtracted every time. So in case you're slightly off, you know where you subtracted a number wrong. Or if you maybe divided by a number wrong at the end, we can go back and check your work. Okay, so that's our summary for today. The measures of center is the mean, the median, the mode. Or I can look at how spread out my data is by comparing the range or the MAD.